I was 21 years old the first time my father made a joke about my life that made the entire room laugh. Not a harmless joke, not a misunderstanding, a deliberate one. My name is Evan Carter, and at the time, I worked maintenance at a downtown office complex. I cleaned restrooms, I replaced ceiling tiles. I fixed broken locks and leaky pipes before sunrise, when the building was still quiet and honest. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real work. And I was proud of it, even if no one else was. My father, however, treated my job like a stain on the family name. My older brother Ryan was already well on his way by then. Investment firm, tailored suits, performance bonuses, the kind of career my father liked to brag about at parties. My sister Nicole had married into money, private schools, vacation photos, carefully staged happiness on social media. They were the proof that he had done something right. And then there was me. The Thanksgiving, when everything changed, looked normal from the outside. Big house, extended family, kids running around, wine glasses clinking louder as the night went on. I arrived with what I always brought, a homemade dessert and a six-pack. I set it down quietly, said hello to people who barely looked up, and found my seat near the end of the table. My father sat at the head, of course. He always did. He loved having an audience. Halfway through dinner, he stood up and tapped his glass. "Let's do a toast," he said. Everyone turned toward him. "To family," he began. "To hard work." Then he smiled. That familiar smile that always meant someone else was about to be the punchline, and to our kids who actually made something of themselves. He raised his glass toward Ryan and Nicole. Then, he added, casually, "and to never ending up cleaning office bathrooms for a living." The laughter didn't explode, it trickled, uncomfortable chuckles, a few forced smiles. I felt every single one of them land on me. No one spoke up. No one interrupted. Ryan smirked and clinked his glass against Dad's. Nicole looked down at her plate, pretending she hadn't heard. I didn't react. I didn't argue. I stood up quietly, pushed my chair in, and walked out the front door. No one followed me. Not that night, not the next day. That was the moment something inside me hardened. What my family never asked, what they never wanted to know, was that the maintenance job was never meant to be my future. I worked those buildings because they taught me things no classroom ever could. I learned how properties actually functioned, how neglect turned into liability, how small fixes prevented massive losses. At night, I took online courses in commercial real estate, property law, zoning regulations, and operations management. Every paycheck went into savings. I wasn't lost. I was building quietly. But quiet people don't impress loud ones. Over the next few years, I stopped showing up as much. Family gatherings felt less like invitations and more like obligations. When I did attend, the script never changed. Ryan talked promotions. Nicole talked renovations and schools. My father nodded proudly and handed out approval like currency. And me, I became background noise. Still doing maintenance? Ever thought about a real career? Some people just peak later. He never asked what I was learning, never asked what I was planning. And I stopped offering answers. By the time I was 28, I bought my first small commercial property. It was ugly, outdated, everything that scared off other buyers. I fixed it myself. By 31, I owned 3. By 33, I had my own property management company. I didn't announce it, I didn't post it, but I never forgot that Thanksgiving toast. And neither did my father. If Thanksgiving planted the seed, Nicole's birthday dinner was where everything finally cracked. She was turning 36. Her husband rented out a private room at one of those restaurants where the lighting is low, the menus are long, and everyone talks a little louder than necessary to prove they belong there. Everyone showed up dressed to be seen. Ryan wore a navy suit, jacket off, but watch clearly visible. Nicole had on a gold wrap dress and heels. She kept adjusting for photos. Even my parents looked polished, like they were preparing for a family portrait. I wore a clean button-down and dark slacks. Nothing flashy, nothing apologetic either. I hadn't even finished sitting down when my father looked me up and down. "Didn't have time to change after work?" he asked, loud enough for the entire table to hear. A few people laughed automatically. I smiled tightly. "I don't work maintenance anymore, Dad." Ryan snorted into his glass. "Oh yeah," he said, promoted to senior cleaner. More laughter. I ignored it. I'd learned that reacting only fed him, but Nicole, she always liked to play the nice one while cutting deeper. "So what you actually do now, Evan?" she asked, smiling sweetly as she sliced into her steak. "You're always so mysterious, never post anything, barely show up to family stuff." I shrugged. "I stay busy." Ryan leaned back in his chair. "Busy doing what?" he pressed. "I mean, it's fine if you're keeping things simple. Not everyone wants the stress of a real career." That's when my father lifted his glass again. "To Evan," he said, grin returning. The most consistent one in the family. Still grounded, still humble, still underemployed. This time everyone laughed. Even my mother, though her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Something in me finally snapped. Not explosively, not loudly. Cleanly. I stood up. No dramatic chair. Scrape. No raised voice. Just calm. "You know what's funny?" I said. The table quieted slightly. "You all talk a lot," I continued, looking at each of them, one by one. "But none of you ever ask questions you actually want answers to." They stared at me. "I own 3 commercial properties," I said. "I manage them myself. I built a company from nothing. No loans, no help, no family money." Silence. "I didn't tell you because I didn't need your approval," I added, "and I definitely didn't want your advice." Ryan's mouth opened slightly, then closed. Nicole froze mid-bite. My father stared at me like I'd spoken in another language. I placed my napkin on the table. "Happy birthday," I said to my sister, and I walked out. For a full week, no one contacted me. Then my mother sent a text. "You didn't need to cause a scene. It was supposed to be a celebration." That was it. No apology. No acknowledgement of what was said to me. Just another quiet reminder that peace mattered more than fairness. I stopped replying. I skipped the next family gathering entirely. That Thanksgiving, I rented a cabin in the mountains instead. Snow silence. No toasts. It was the first holiday I'd enjoyed in years. But the fallout wasn't done. 2 weeks later, my business started to unravel. All at once. A burst pipe at one building, a broken lock at another, HVAC complaints from tenants whose systems had just been inspected. Then my bank called. They wanted to confirm a series of refund requests and cancel payments. I hadn't authorized any of it. I logged into our internal admin system. And that's when my stomach dropped. Someone had accessed the platform remotely. The email address wasn't new, it was old. An address I hadn't seen in years. One my father used to have back when he helped Ryan set up a small investment project ages ago. I checked the IP logs. There was no doubt the access came from my parents' house. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the dark, staring at the glow of my laptop, hoping there was another explanation. Maybe the IP was spoofed. Maybe Ryan had used their network. Maybe it was a coincidence. But deep down, I knew. The timing was too precise, the damage too targeted. My father didn't understand modern tech, but he understood operations. And for the first time, he'd turned that knowledge against me. I documented everything. Screenshots, timestamps, system access records, not for a lawsuit, for myself. To know I wasn't imagining it. I drove to my parents' house, Yoon announced. My mother was in the kitchen, frosting cupcakes, like it was any normal day. "Evan," she said, surprised, "you didn't say you were coming by." "Where's Dad?" I asked. Her smile faded. "In the garage." I walked straight past the living room walls, lined with Ryan's achievements and Nicole's wedding photos. There were none of me. He was sitting at the workbench when I opened the garage door, sorting old tools. He looked up, startled. "Didn't expect to see you," he said. I handed him the folder. He glanced at the pages and scoffed. "You came all this way for this?" I waited. "So what if I looked into your little operation?" he said. "Your systems are a mess. You run things like a janitor." My mouth went dry. "You accessed my accounts," I said. "You triggered fake issues. You tried to damage my business," he shrugged. "I was testing you," he said. "Thought maybe you'd finally let someone with experience help." I laughed, not because it was funny but because it was unbelievable. "You didn't help," I said. "You sabotaged." He stood up, eyes flashing. "I built a career from scratch," he snapped. "You just got lucky with property." I didn't argue. I turned around and walked out. That was the last time I spoke to him for nearly 2 years. 6 months passed without a word from my family. Then one afternoon, my phone rang. It was Ryan. He never called unless he needed something. "Hey," he said, voice stiff, "you got a minute?" "What's going on?" I asked. "It's Dad." He hesitated before continuing. "He got laid off. Company restructuring. They cut his entire department." I stayed silent. "Mom's worried," Ryan added. "He hasn't been himself. Just sits at home, won't talk to anyone. He's been applying places, but nothing's coming back." Then Ryan cleared his throat. "He saw your name downtown. One of your buildings. A tenant mentioned you. He didn't know you owned it." I didn't respond. "He asked if you were hiring." Ryan finally said, "I'm not saying you owe him anything, but maybe just talk to him. Even a reference. He's proud, but he's scared. I've never seen him like this." I agreed to meet, not out of obligation, but because I wanted to see him, to see if he could actually say it. That's how I found him sitting outside my office building on a grey winter morning, rain soaking through his coat, holding a manila folder like it was the last thing keeping him upright. For a moment, I didn't recognize him. His hair was thinner, his shoulders hunched. The man who once filled every room now looked small. He stared at the glass doors like he wasn't sure he was allowed inside. When he finally noticed me, the look on his face told me he already knew. But before I could speak, before he could ask for anything, my mind went back to everything that came before, the years of mockery, the public humiliation, the sabotage, that Thanksgiving toast, that birthday dinner, that garage conversation. This wasn't sudden, this was earned. I didn't stop speaking to my family immediately after the dinner, but something in me shut down. Calls became shorter, texts unanswered. My mother tried to pretend nothing was wrong. She always had. She was good at looking away, at smoothing things over with food and forced smile. But the pattern never changed. At every gathering, Dad still found ways to remind me where he thought I belonged, still fixing toilets. "You know, if you'd followed Ryan's lead, you'd have a corner office by now. Some people just take longer to bloom." He never asked what I was actually doing. He never asked how I went from 1 property to 3. He didn't want to know. And after the sabotage, I understood why. When I confronted him in the garage and walked out, I didn't feel angry. I felt empty. For weeks, I went through the motions. Meetings, contracts, signatures. My assistant Maya noticed first. She asked if I wanted her to take things off my plate. I told her I was just tired. The truth was, I was questioning everything. For the first time since I was 17, I thought about selling everything, walking away, building something smaller, quieter. Something my family couldn't touch. But then a tenant called me personally. A pediatric clinic director. She thanked me for replacing an HVAC unit immediately. "No delays, no excuses. You're the most responsive owner we've ever had," she said. "You actually care." That stuck with me. I cared. Even when my family didn't, I poured myself back into the business, quietly. Upgraded security, hired an IT consultant, locked down permissions, built layered access logs. Every vulnerability my father exploited was sealed. Then I expanded, a 4th property, a 5th. A mid-rise turned into a co-working hub. I hired local contractors full-time, gave them benefits, respect. I didn't just want growth, I wanted durability. And then, 2 winters after the sabotage, Maya knocked on my office door. "There's someone outside," she said. "He's here about a job." I looked up confused. She hesitated. "It's your father." I stood and walked to the window. There he was again, this time in the snow. Folder tucked under his arm. Waiting, not demanding, not confident, waiting, and for the first time, I felt something new. Not anger, not satisfaction, control. I told Maya not to let him in yet. She looked surprised but nodded. I went back to my desk and opened a folder labeled contingencies. Inside were logs, IP traces, access timestamps. Proof I'd never shown anyone. I printed a few pages, then I called my lawyer. "Hypothetical question," I said. "If someone with a history of interference showed up asking for work, could I hire them under strict limitations?" He paused. "You could," he said, "but you'd want airtight boundaries. Nah. No system access, full monitoring." When I hung up, I smiled for the first time in a long while. Not out of revenge, but clarity. Then I told Maya to bring him in.